Her sisters took the house, the land, and the money. They left her a worthless barn. But what they forgot, and what her father remembered, would change everything. If you've ever felt counted out before the game even started, stick around. This story is for you. And if it hits home, hit that subscribe button, because we're building a community here for people who get it. The day I turned 18 felt less like a birthday and more like an eviction. There was a cake, of course. A sheet cake from the grocery store with yellow frosting that tasted like chemicals and sugar, the kind of sweetness that coats your teeth instantly. It said, "Happy birthday, Alara," in shaky blue gel. The other girls in the group home, the ones who hadn't aged out yet, sang the song with the same weary enthusiasm they used for everything. It was a Tuesday. Just another Tuesday, except it was my last one inside the gray walls of the St. Jude's Home for Children. For 2 years, since Dad died and my sisters decided a 16-year-old was too much to handle, this had been my reality. 2 years of scheduled meals, mandatory group therapy sessions where we all lied about our progress, and nights spent listening to other girls cry into their state-issued pillows. Freedom, I'd thought, would taste different, sweeter than this cake. It would feel like a deep breath after being underwater for too long. Instead, it just felt empty. A quiet, hollow space where the noise of the home used to be. My social worker, Ms. Albright, handed me a manila envelope. It was thick and felt important, the way things you don't understand often do. Her smile was practiced, a mix of pity and professional detachment. "This is it, Alara. Everything you need for your transition." Inside was a bus pass with 10 preloaded rides, a voucher for a week at a transitional housing shelter downtown, and a list of job placement agencies that specialized in clients with limited work history. There was also a crisp $20 bill, a personal gift from her, she said. It felt like the saddest $20 in the world. I folded it carefully and put it in the pocket of my jeans. The jeans were new, a leaving gift from the home, and they were stiff and uncomfortable. Everything felt borrowed. Nothing felt like mine. "There's one more thing," she said, pulling another, more official-looking envelope from her briefcase. It was heavy, made of thick, creamy paper. My name and the address of the home were typed on the front. In the top left corner, it said, "From the offices of Blackwood, Finch, and Associates." A law firm. My stomach tightened. "This arrived for you last week," Ms. Albright explained. "It's regarding your father's estate. We waited until your birthday, as instructed." My father's estate. The words sounded like something from a movie. I hadn't heard from my sisters, Jenna and Chloe, since the funeral. Not a call, not a letter, not even a text message on my 17th birthday. They were 10 and 12 years older than me, practically adults when I was still a kid. After our mom left, it was just the three of us and Dad. They had their own lives, their own orbits I was never really a part of. When Dad got sick, they came home, and their presence felt like an invasion. They spoke in low, urgent whispers in the kitchen, their conversations always stopping the moment I walked in. After he was gone, they moved fast. The house, the land, his savings, it was all theirs, they said. I was a minor. It was complicated, they said. St. Jude's was the best place for me, they said. It would be temporary. That was 2 years ago. I stared at the envelope. It didn't feel like a connection. It felt like a final severing. I waited until I was on the bus, heading toward the downtown shelter, to open it. The bus smelled like stale air and disinfectant. I sat by a window smeared with fingerprints and watched the familiar, drab buildings of the city slide by. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. The letter was short, printed on paper so thick it felt like a threat. It was from a man named Arthur Finch. He was the legal representative for my sisters, Jenna and Chloe Masters. It was a formal notification. The estate of our father, Samuel Masters, had been settled. It went on to list assets in cold, legal terms. The primary residence, the surrounding acreage, the investment accounts. All of it, the letter stated, had been passed to his eldest daughters as per his final wishes. My name appeared in the last paragraph. To his youngest daughter, Ilera Masters, Samuel Masters bequeaths the outbuilding located at the northern edge of the property, commonly referred to as the tool barn, and its contents. All property taxes on the main parcel are the responsibility of your sisters. However, any liability or cost associated with the barn structure itself is now yours. Furthermore, please be advised that the entire property is under contract for sale to a development firm. You have 30 days from this date to remove any personal effects from the barn. After this period, the structure will be demolished along with the rest of the property to make way for the new construction. I read it again and again. The words swam in front of my eyes. A tool barn. He left me a tool barn. A collapsing, drafty shed full of rusting saws and old jars of nails. It was more than an insult. It was a message. It was my sisters telling me, in the coldest, most official way they could, that I was worth nothing more than a pile of junk. A liability. Something to be cleared out before the real business could begin. The bus lurched to a stop, and the $20 bill in my pocket suddenly felt even smaller. The hollow space inside me started to fill up with something cold and heavy. It wasn't sadness. It was a slow, burning rage. They had taken everything, erased me from the family, and now they were going to bulldoze the last piece of my father I had left. I looked down at the letter, at the lawyer's signature, and made a decision. I wasn't going to the shelter. I wasn't going to a job placement agency. I was going to take my bus pass and my $20, and I was going to go claim the only thing in the world that was mine, a broken-down tool barn. The pro bono legal aid office was in the basement of a community center, smelling of damp concrete and old paper. The man who agreed to see me was named Mr. Davies. He was older, with tired eyes and a kind, weary face. He wore a rumpled suit and looked like he'd seen every sad story the city had to offer. I was just one more file in a stack that was already too high. I handed him the letter from Blackwood, Finch, and Associates. He read it slowly, his expression unreadable. He pushed his glasses up his nose. "Well," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It's legally straightforward. Unfair, perhaps, but not illegal. Without seeing the will itself, I can't say for sure, but on the face of it, they've followed the process." He looked at me over the top of his glasses. "What do you want to do, Ilera?" His question was simple, but the answer felt impossibly complex. What did I want? I wanted my father back. I wanted a family that hadn't thrown me away. I wanted a home. But those things weren't on the table. "I want to see it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The barn. I want to go there." He seemed to understand something in my tone, a flicker of defiance he hadn't expected. He nodded slowly. "The property is in Oakhaven, right? That's a 3-hour bus ride from here." He looked at my thin jacket and the small state-issued duffel bag at my feet. "Do you have anywhere to stay when you get there?" I shook my head. "There's a motel just off the highway, about 2 miles from your father's old place," he said, scribbling on a notepad. "The Sleepy Pine. Not fancy, but it's clean. Your $20 will get you 1 night. Maybe 2 if the owner, Mrs. Gable, is in a good mood." He sighed and opened a drawer in his metal desk. He pulled out a small book of bus tickets. "This is from a discretionary fund. For emergencies." He tore out a round-trip ticket to Oakhaven and slid it across the desk to me. "This will get you there and back. You have 30 days, according to this letter. Go see your barn. See what's there. But be prepared, kid. It might just be a barn." His kindness felt like a life raft in a cold ocean. He wasn't promising a miracle. He was just giving me a chance to see the wreckage for myself. And for some reason, that was enough. He also gave me his card. Call me if you find anything. Anything at all. Even if it seems like nothing. The bus ride to Oakhaven was a journey back in time. The city's gray, uniform buildings slowly gave way to strip malls, then to suburbs with identical houses, and finally, to the rolling, green hills and dense forests of the countryside. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching the landscape of my childhood rush by. Every curve in the road, every cluster of oak trees, sparked a memory. Dad driving his old pickup truck, the windows down, singing off-key to the radio. Me in the passenger seat, my small feet barely reaching the floor. The smell of pine needles and damp earth. The way the light looked slanting through the trees in the late afternoon. These were the things my sisters couldn't take, the memories stored in a place they couldn't touch. But as the bus drew closer to the town, a knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. The memories were warm, but the reality waiting for me was cold. What if Mr. Davies was right? What if it was just a barn? A final, pathetic monument to how little I mattered. The bus hissed to a stop at the Oakhaven station, which was really just a covered bench and a signpost next to a gas station. The air was different here. Cleaner. Sharper. It smelled like home, and the familiarity was a punch to the gut. I shouldered my duffel bag, the strap digging into my shoulder, and started the 2-mile walk toward the Sleepy Pine Motel. The motel was exactly as Mr. Davies had described it, a low, single-story building with a faded sign of a winking pine tree. The woman at the desk, Mrs. Gable, had sharp eyes and a tightly permed cloud of gray hair. She looked me up and down, taking in my worn clothes and the exhaustion on my face. I pushed the $20 bill across the counter. "One night, please," I said. She took the money without a word and handed me a key attached to a large plastic diamond. "Room 7. Checkout is 11, she said, her voice raspy. The room was small and smelled of lemon-scented cleaner and stale cigarette smoke. But the bed was clean, and there was a lock on the door. It was the first time in 2 years I had a room all to myself. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress. For a long moment, I just breathed. The silence was overwhelming. There were no footsteps in the hall, no shouting from the common room, no mandated lights out. There was just me and the quiet hum of the mini-fridge in the corner. I lay back on the bed, my worn-out sneakers still on, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Sleep came quickly. A heavy, dreamless sleep that was less about rest and more about escape. The next morning, I woke up with the sun. I had no money for breakfast, but the hunger in my stomach was nothing compared to the gnawing need to see the property, to see what was left. I walked the 2 miles from the motel, my footsteps loud on the quiet country road. And then I saw it. The long gravel driveway, the familiar line of maple trees my father had planted. My heart hammered against my ribs. I walked up the driveway, half expecting my sisters to come out of the house and yell at me to leave. But the place was silent. The main house, a beautiful 2-story farmhouse Dad had spent his life restoring, looked empty and sad. The windows were dark. The paint was peeling slightly around the porch. A large, garish "For Sale" sign had been pounded into the front lawn. "Blackwood Real Estate," it read, with a picture of a smiling, predatory-looking agent. My sisters weren't just selling the house, they were erasing it. I walked around the side of the house, my feet sinking into the overgrown grass. And there it was. At the far edge of the property, nestled against the dark line of the woods, was the tool barn. It was worse than I remembered. The red paint was almost completely gone, faded to a pale, ghostly pink. The roof sagged in the middle, looking like a strong wind could bring the whole thing down. One of the doors hung crookedly on a single hinge. It looked derelict, forgotten. It looked exactly like I felt. I pushed through the tall weeds, my jeans getting soaked with dew. A heavy, rusted padlock held the two main doors together. Of course. Locked. They had left me a pile of junk, but made sure I couldn't even get to it. Frustration and anger washed over me. I kicked the door, a useless, childish act that only made my toes ache. I sank down onto the damp ground, my back against the splintered wood, and for the first time since I'd left St. Jude's, I cried. Not loud, sobbing tears, but silent, hot tears of pure, helpless rage. I cried for my father. I cried for the home I had lost. And I cried for the girl who was left with nothing but a locked barn and 30 days to disappear. After the tears stopped, the anger remained, but it had cooled into something harder. Determination. I was not going to be beaten by a rusty lock. I stood up and started searching around the base of the barn, my fingers probing through the weeds and dirt. Dad was a man of habits, of secret hiding places. He always said, "Every problem has a key, Alara. You just have to know where to look." He used to hide a spare key for the house under a loose stone in the garden wall, a key for the truck in a magnetic box under the bumper. He had to have a key for this place somewhere. I circled the barn twice, my hope dwindling with every step. It was just junk. Weeds, broken pots, a pile of rotting firewood. And then I saw it. Tucked away under the eaves on the backside of the barn, almost completely obscured by a thorny raspberry bush, was a small, wooden birdhouse. It was one I had made for him in a summer camp woodworking class when I was 10. It was lopsided and crudely painted, but he had hung it with pride. My heart started to beat faster. I reached through the thorns, scratching my arm, and felt inside the small opening. My fingers brushed against something cold and metal. I pulled it out. It was an old, heavy iron key, dark with rust but solid. It was the key. It took some effort, jamming the key into the padlock and turning it with all my strength, but finally, with a loud, groaning crack, the lock sprang open. I pulled the heavy chain away and dragged the one good door open. It scraped against the concrete floor, the sound echoing in the morning quiet. I stood at the threshold, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. The air inside was thick with the smell of sawdust, oil, and time. It was the smell of my father. The barn was cluttered, filled with the ghosts of 1,000 unfinished projects. A workbench ran along one entire wall, covered in tools, half-disassembled engines, and jars of screws and bolts. Saws and drills hung from pegboards. Stacks of lumber leaned against the walls. It was messy, but it was an organized chaos, his chaos. To my sisters, this was a junk pile, a liability. To me, it was a cathedral. It was the last place on earth that felt like him. I walked slowly through the space, running my hand over the dusty surface of his workbench. My fingers left a clean streak in the grime. And that's when I saw it. Sitting right in the center of the bench, as if it had been left there for me, was a small, gray metal box. It was a simple cash box, the kind you'd buy at an office supply store. Scratched into the lid, in my father's familiar, jagged handwriting, was one word: Alara. My breath caught in my throat. The box was locked, a small, simple lock on the front. There was no key next to it. I looked around the workbench, my eyes scanning the clutter of tools and parts. No key. I tried to pry it open, but it was solid. This was another test, another puzzle. Every problem has a key, Alara. His voice echoed in my memory. Where would he hide a key for me? Not under a rock, not in a birdhouse. This would be something different, something only I would know. My eyes roamed the barn, over the shelves packed with old paint cans and technical manuals, and then I saw it. On a low shelf near the back, tucked between a dusty copy of a tractor repair guide and a book on electrical wiring, was a thin, worn-out paperback. It was a book of fairy tales. The cover was a picture of a princess in a tower. It was the book he used to read to me every single night before I went to sleep, the one I'd left behind when I was sent to the home. My hands were shaking as I pulled it from the shelf. I opened the cover. The pages were yellowed and soft with age. I flipped through them, my heart pounding, until I reached my favorite story, The Princess and the Key. And there, taped to the page, was a small, silver key. The key to the box. I took the book and the key back to the workbench. With a deep breath, I inserted the key into the lock on the metal box. It turned with a satisfying click. I lifted the lid. Inside, there wasn't money, not at first. There was a thick stack of envelopes, held together with a rubber band. On top of the stack was a single sheet of paper, folded in half. My name was on it. I unfolded it. It was a letter in his familiar hand. "My dearest Ilara," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. And things have gone exactly as I feared they would. I am so sorry. I am sorry for leaving you, and I am sorry for what your sisters have likely put you through. They don't see the world the way we do, you and I. They see value in dollars, in property lines, in what things are worth. They don't see what things mean. I knew they would take the house. I knew they would liquidate everything. And I knew they would see this old barn as nothing more than a pile of worthless junk. Which is why I left the most valuable thing I have for you. Not this barn, my love. But what's inside it?" I had to stop reading, my vision blurring with tears. I wiped them away with the back of my dusty hand, and continued. "This is my real workshop, my sanctuary. And now, it is yours. There are things hidden here, things to help you, things to protect you. This is a treasure map of sorts, Ilara. Follow my letters, they will lead you. Start with the second envelope, and know this, always, my leaving was not a choice. But leaving you this, protecting you this way, that was my choice. It was the last, best thing I could do for you. All my love, Dad." I put the letter down, my whole body trembling. A treasure map. He had built me a treasure map out of his love and his foresight. I picked up the stack of envelopes. They were numbered. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 5. I took the first envelope, marked with a large number, 1. Inside was another letter and a thick, tight bundle of cash. I counted it. $2,000 in $50 bills. My hands shook as I held it. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. The letter was short. "This is for right now. For a room, for food, for a decent coat, for a little breathing room. Don't be afraid to use it. It's for you. Go to the Sleepy Pine, pay Mrs. Gable for a month. She's a good woman, gruff on the outside, but she knew your mother. She'll look out for you. Get yourself settled, then come back for the next letter. One step at a time, my girl. Just like we learned to build that birdhouse, one piece at a time." I sat there on the dusty floor of the barn, a letter from my dead father in one hand and $2,000 in the other, and I laughed. It was a strange, choked sound, half sob, half giggle. It was the sound of hope, raw and unexpected. He hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't abandoned me. He had been planning, protecting me, even as he was dying. He knew his other daughters, and he had outsmarted them. He had used their own greed and their blindness against them. They saw a liability. He had built a legacy. I carefully put the money and the first letter into my duffel bag, along with the metal box. I locked the barn behind me, using the old iron key, and put it safely in my pocket. I walked back down the long gravel driveway, but this time, I wasn't just a discarded kid with $20 to her name. I was a girl with a secret. A girl with a map. I had a purpose. I walked to the Sleepy Pine Motel, the $2,000 a warm, heavy weight in my bag. Mrs. Gable was at the front desk, reading a newspaper. I walked up to the counter and put $500 down. "I'd like the room for a month," I said. My voice didn't shake. She looked at the money, then up at me, her sharp eyes assessing me. A flicker of something, surprise, respect, crossed her face. She nodded slowly, took the money, and slid a receipt across the counter. "Breakfast is at 7, she said. "Don't be late." The next few days were a blur of practicalities. I bought new clothes that actually fit. A thick, warm jacket and sturdy boots. I bought groceries. Bread, cheese, apples. Things I could eat in my room. I opened a bank account in the small-town bank. Every action, no matter how small, felt like a victory. A piece of a life I was building for myself. But every morning, I walked the 2 miles back to the barn. It was my ritual, my church. It was where I felt closest to my father. On the 4th day, I was ready for the next step. I opened the metal box and took out the envelope marked with a 2. Inside was another letter and a set of old, detailed blueprints. "Ilara," the letter read, "I hope you're feeling a little more settled, a little safer. Now for the next piece of the puzzle. This barn is older than it looks, much older. I rebuilt it on the foundation of the original homestead from the 1800s. There are secrets in the bones of this place. Look at the blueprints. Now look at the floor. Find the spot on the west wall, 3rd post from the corner. The floorboards there are different. They're newer. I had to replace them a few years back. There's a loose one. You'll need a crowbar. There's one hanging on the wall by the door. Be careful. What's under there is important." My heart hammered. I found the crowbar, its metal cool and heavy in my hands. I went to the west wall, counted the thick wooden posts. 1, 2, 3. I looked down at the floorboards. He was right. One of them was a slightly lighter shade of wood, the grain different from the others. I wedged the end of the crowbar into the thin crack and pushed down. The board groaned in protest, then popped up with a splintering sound. I knelt and lifted it away. Beneath it was a dark, hollow space, and in that space, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from the damp, was a long, leather-bound ledger. I lifted it out. It was heavy. I sat down on the floor and untied the leather cord that held it shut. I opened it to the first page. It was my father's handwriting, neat and precise. It was a detailed inventory, but not of tools. It was an inventory of his inventions. For years, my dad had been a machinist and an engineer at a big manufacturing plant. But at home, in this barn, he was an inventor. He was always tinkering, designing, building. I remembered the sounds of him working late into the night, the buzz of a saw, the clang of metal. My sisters called it his hobby, a waste of time. But this ledger told a different story. Page after page was filled with detailed drawings, schematics, and descriptions of devices he had designed. A more efficient pump for irrigating fields. A new kind of gear system for heavy machinery. A small, powerful engine that could run on biofuel. Next to each invention, there were notes, dates, and, most importantly, patent numbers. He had patented everything. Tucked into the back of the ledger was a thick envelope. Inside were the official patent documents from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Dozens of them. They were all in his name. A final note was clipped to the front of the envelope. "Your sisters don't know about these. They thought my tinkering was just a silly hobby. The company I worked for offered to buy some of these years ago, but they wanted to pay me a fraction of what they were worth. I refused. I held on to them. They are worth something, Ilara. A lot of something. But they are only valuable if you know what to do with them. This is your leverage. This is your power. But it's not the most important thing hidden here. Get ready for the next step. This one is the hardest." I closed the ledger, my mind reeling. My father wasn't just a mechanic. He was a quiet genius. And he had left me the fruits of his life's work. The weight of it felt immense. This wasn't just about a barn anymore. It was about his legacy. Have you ever discovered a secret about someone you love? a secret that changes the entire way you see them. It's like a room in a house you've lived in your whole life, and you suddenly find a door you never knew was there. You open it, and it changes everything. For anyone watching who has had a moment like that, who has had to completely reframe their past, let me know in the comments. You're not alone in that feeling of the world shifting under your feet. And if these stories, these moments of discovery, mean something to you, please consider subscribing. We're all just trying to find the hidden doors. Okay, let's get back to the barn, because the biggest door was still waiting to be opened. A week passed. I spent my days in the barn, poring over the patent documents and the ledger, trying to understand the scope of what my father had created. I called Mr. Davies. I explained, my voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and fear, what I had found. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Patents," he finally said, his voice sharp with interest. "Are you serious, Alara?" I told him I was. I read him the patent numbers. I could hear the sound of him typing furiously on his computer. "My God," he whispered after a few minutes. "Kid, do you have any idea what these are? This one here, for the gear system. There's a company that's been trying to develop something similar for years and failing. This could be significant." He told me not to tell anyone else, not to breathe a word. He said he was going to make some calls to a friend of his who specialized in intellectual property law. "Just sit tight," he said, "and be careful." The weight of the secret was heavy. I felt like I was living in two worlds. In one, I was the quiet girl in room 7 of the Sleepy Pine Motel, the one Mrs. Gable left an extra muffin for at breakfast. In the other, I was the keeper of a secret legacy, a portfolio of inventions that could be worth a fortune. The for sale sign on the lawn was a constant, looming threat. I saw the real estate agent's car drive by slowly a few times. A man in a suit got out once and walked the property line, his eyes dismissive as they swept over the dilapidated barn. He had no idea what was inside. They had no idea. After a week of waiting, of feeling my anxiety grow with every passing day, I knew it was time. I went back to the barn, back to the metal box. It was time for envelope number 3. This letter was different. It was shorter, the handwriting a little less steady. I realized he must have written these at different times as his illness progressed. "Alara, this is the hard part I warned you about. It's about your mother. There are things I never told you, things I should have. She didn't just leave, my girl. It was more complicated than that. She was sick. Not like I was, not in her body, but in her mind. It got bad after you were born. She loved you so much, but she was drowning in a sadness she couldn't escape. The doctors called it depression, but it was more than that. It was a storm inside her. I tried to help her, we all did, but in the end, she made a choice. She left to protect you from that storm. She thought you'd be better off. She was wrong, but she did it out of love. A broken kind of love, but love all the same. Your sisters, they were older. They remember the bad times. They were angry. They never forgave her. And I think, in a way, they never forgave you for being the one she was trying to protect." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank onto an old wooden crate, the letter shaking in my hand. My mother. The story I'd always been told was simple. She left. She didn't want us. She didn't want me. It was a clean, sharp wound I had learned to live with. This new story was messy, complicated, and 1,000 times more painful. It wasn't abandonment. It was a tragedy. The letter continued. "I kept all of her things. Your sisters wanted to throw them out, to erase her. I couldn't let that happen. I packed them all away. They're in the old loft, above the workbench. The ladder is behind the woodpile. Be careful, the rungs are old. What you find up there isn't about money, Alara. It's about truth. It's your story, too." I felt a profound sense of dread. I didn't want to know more. I wanted to fold the letter up and put it away. But I couldn't. I had to see it through. For him. For her. For me. I found the old wooden ladder and propped it against the wall. It was rickety, and it swayed under my weight as I climbed. The loft was dark and choked with dust and cobwebs. In the center of the dusty floor were 3 large, sealed steamer trunks. I spent the rest of the day in that loft, opening the trunks. It was like excavating a life. The first trunk was filled with her clothes. Simple dresses, worn sweaters, a pair of scuffed leather boots. They smelled faintly of cedar and lavender. The second trunk held her books. Novels with cracked spines and underlined passages, books of poetry, journals filled with her elegant, looping handwriting. I sat there on the dusty floor and read my mother's words. She wrote about the weather, about the garden, about her love for my father. And she wrote about her sadness, the gray fog that would roll in and not leave for days. She wrote about her love for her daughters, her hopes for Jenna and Chloe, her fears for her new baby, Ilara. It was all there. A portrait of a woman I had never known. A woman who was brilliant and funny and loving and deeply, deeply broken. The third trunk was the hardest. It was filled with photographs, albums of her and my dad when they were young and in love, pictures of my sisters as smiling, gap-toothed children, and then pictures of me, a tiny baby with a tuft of dark hair cradled in her arms. In every picture, she is looking at me with an expression of such fierce, desperate love it stole my breath away. This wasn't the face of a woman who wanted to leave. It was the face of a woman who was terrified of staying. I didn't leave the barn until it was dark. I didn't eat. I just sat with the ghost of my mother, with the truth of her life, and I grieved. I grieved for the mother I never knew, and for the little girl who grew up believing she was unwanted. The anger I had felt toward her my whole life dissolved, replaced by a profound, aching sadness. My father had given me an incredible gift. He hadn't just given me patents and money. He had given me back my mother. He had given me the truth. And the truth, as painful as it was a kind of home. I finally understood the rift in my family, the anger in my sisters. They had chosen to live with a simple, angry story. My father had saved the complicated, true one for me. That night, sleep didn't come. I lay in my motel room bed, staring into the darkness, the faces from the photographs burned into my mind. The 30-day deadline was ticking away. The developers were coming. My sisters were erasing our history. And I was the only one who held the full story. The question was, what was I supposed to do with it? The answer, I knew, had to be in the last 2 envelopes. The next morning, I felt a new sense of urgency. The emotional storm of the previous day had passed, leaving a calm, clear resolve in its wake. I knew what I had to do. I had to save this place, not just for the patents, not just for the money, but for the history it held, for the truth. I went to the barn and opened envelope number 4. The letter was very short, just a few sentences. The handwriting was shaky, almost illegible. Almost done, Ilara. I'm getting tired. The last piece is in my old work coat, the one hanging by the door. Check the lining. It's time to fight back now. Don't be afraid. You are my daughter. You are her daughter. You are stronger than any of them. His old canvas work coat was hanging from a nail. It smelled like him, a faint mix of grease and sawdust. I felt a lump form in my throat as I ran my hand over the worn fabric. I felt inside the pockets first. An old wrench, a few loose screws, a crumpled receipt. Then I felt along the inside lining. Near the bottom, my fingers found a thick, stiff patch. A section that had been sewn shut. I found a utility knife on the workbench and carefully sliced the stitches. I reached inside. My fingers closed around a slim, plastic object, a USB drive. And behind it, a folded piece of paper. It was a legal document, a quitclaim deed. It transferred ownership of the 1-acre parcel the barn sat on, and the barn itself, from him To me, it was dated a month before he died, and it had been legally filed with the county clerk's office. It was official. I owned this land. The barn wasn't just bequeathed to me. It was legally mine, separate from the rest of the estate. My sisters couldn't touch it. They couldn't demolish it. I sank onto a stool, the deed in one hand, the USB drive in the other. He had legally severed this piece of the property. He had made it a fortress for me. They had probably never even checked the county records for the barn parcel, assuming it was all one lot. They had made a mistake. A huge, arrogant mistake. I looked at the small USB drive. What could be on here that was so important? I didn't have a computer. I ran back to the motel, my heart pounding with a wild, desperate hope. Mrs. Gable was in the small office behind the front desk. "Mrs. Gable," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you have a computer I could use? It's an emergency." She looked at me, her expression unreadable, then nodded toward an old desktop computer sitting on a desk cluttered with papers. "You've got 10 minutes," she said. I plugged in the drive. A single file folder appeared on the screen. The folder was titled, "For Ilara." I clicked it. Inside were dozens of files, scanned documents, audio files, and one video file. The first thing I opened was a scanned copy of my father's actual last will and testament. It looked nothing like the one my sister's lawyer had. In this will, he left the main house and half the savings to be split between Jenna and Chloe. The other half of the savings, the patents, the barn, and the acre of land it sat on, he left to me. He also stipulated that the property could not be sold until I was 25, and only if I agreed to it. The will my sisters had filed was a forgery. An older version they must have found and used, assuming I would never know the difference. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just greed. This was a crime. I clicked on one of the audio files. My father's voice filled the small office, weak but clear. It was a recording of a phone call. I heard my sister Jenna's voice, sharp and angry. "Dad, it's not fair," she was saying. "You can't leave her that much. She's just a kid. We're the ones who have been here." And my father's voice, tired but firm. "It's my decision, Jenna. It's what's right. I'm protecting her. This conversation is over." There were other recordings, conversations with his lawyer, where he explicitly stated his intentions to provide for me. Conversations with a financial advisor, setting up an account in my name. He had been documenting their greed, their attempts to manipulate him, for months. The final file was a video. I clicked play. My father's face appeared on the screen. He looked so thin, so tired, but his eyes were clear and bright. He was in his chair in the barn. "Hello, Ilara," he said, his voice raspy. "If you're seeing this, it means you found everything. I'm so proud of you. I knew you could. Listen, I don't want you to be filled with hate. Your sisters are lost. They let fear and bitterness poison them. But you can't let them take your future. Use this. Give it to a lawyer. Give it to Mr. Davies if he's still around. It's the proof you need. This land, this barn, it's your start. It's not just a home, it's a foundation. Build something good here. For me, for your mother, for you. I love you, Ilara. I've always loved you." The video ended. I sat there, stunned, tears streaming down my face. Mrs. Gable came out of the back room. She looked at my face, then at the screen. She put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You okay, kid?" she asked, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I could only nod. I saved the files to the computer's hard drive and then emailed a copy to Mr. Davies with the subject line, "I found everything. Call me." Then I pulled out the last envelope. Number 5. It was thin. Inside was not a letter. It was a simple, hand-drawn map of the property. The main house, the fields, the woods. and the barn. He had drawn a big, red heart around the barn. On the back, he had written one sentence: "Home is not a place you are given, it's a place you make." I finally understood. The inheritance wasn't the patents or the money or even the land. The inheritance was the choice, the tools to build my own life, the chance to make my own home. I called Mr. Davies from the motel office phone. "I got your email," he said, his voice electric. "Elara, this is a smoking gun. Forgery, fraud. They could be in serious trouble." "What do I do?" I asked, my voice small. "You do nothing," he said. "You stay put. I'm handling it. I'm calling their lawyer, Mr. Finch, right now. The sale of that property is dead in the water. You are in control now, Elara. You hold all the cards." The call from Arthur Finch came 2 days later. He wanted a meeting. He sounded flustered, his professional composure completely gone. Mr. Davies advised me to let him handle it. The negotiations were swift. Faced with evidence of felony-level fraud, my sisters had no choice. They folded completely. The contract with the developer was voided. The forged will was withdrawn. The true will was filed for probate. Within a week, the "for sale" sign on the front lawn was gone. My sisters, through their lawyer, offered me a settlement. They would sign over the entire property, the house, the land, everything, in exchange for me not pressing criminal charges. They wanted to disappear, to walk away without a prison sentence. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about the anger, the years of neglect, the coldness. I thought about the video of my father, his tired eyes pleading with me not to be filled with hate. I told Mr. Davies to accept the offer. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted my home. The day I got the keys to the main house was strange. It was a cold, sunny afternoon. The house was empty. They had taken all the furniture, everything of value. The rooms echoed with my footsteps. It was just a shell. It didn't feel like home yet, but it was mine. I spent the next few months living in that empty house, sleeping on a mattress on the floor. Mr. Davies helped me find a patent lawyer, and we began the process of licensing some of my father's inventions. The money started to come in. Not a flood, but a steady, reliable stream. Enough to live on, enough to start rebuilding. I hired a local crew to put a new roof on the barn. I painted the faded siding, a deep, vibrant red. I cleaned and organized the inside, but I left my father's workbench exactly as it was. That was sacred ground. I started working in there myself, learning to use his tools, feeling a connection to him in the heft of a hammer, the scent of cut wood. The house took longer. I filled it slowly, piece by piece. A comfortable chair, a sturdy table. I planted a garden in the spring, just like my mother used to. The locals in town started to know me. Mrs. Gable would wave from the motel. The man at the hardware store taught me the difference between wood screws and drywall screws. I was no longer the sad, discarded girl from the group home. I was Elara Masters, the girl who lived in the old master's place. I never heard from my sisters directly. I heard through Mr. Davies that they moved out of state. I hope they found some kind of peace, but I don't waste my time thinking about them. My family isn't them. My family is the memory of my father's love, the truth of my mother's struggle, and the quiet strength I found in a dusty, forgotten barn. My father was right. Home isn't a place you're given, it's a place you make. He didn't just leave me a barn. He left me the blueprints, he left me the tools, and he trusted me to do the building. Standing on the porch of my house, looking out over the land that is mine, I finally understand what inheritance really is. It's not about the things you are left. It's about the lessons you are taught. It's the love that is strong enough to reach across time, to light a path for you in the dark. This whole journey, from that gray room at St. Jude's to this porch, has taught me one thing above all else. The things people dismiss as worthless are often where the real treasure is hidden. In an old barn, in a complicated story, in a person that everyone else has counted out. If you've ever felt like that, like you've been handed the worthless, forgotten thing, I want you to look closer. The key is there. The map is there. You just have to be brave enough to look for it. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for your own piece of the world, share your story in the comments below. Let's make this a place where we celebrate the forgotten things. And please, subscribe to the channel. Let's keep building this community, one story at a time.